So let's go. So again, welcome everyone. Welcome panelists. Welcome families, students, parents, etc. This is, I think, our fourth annual college support panel that the Greenwich Public Schools, specifically the school counseling department, in conjunction with the special education department, has put together. We have four wonderful panelists that have agreed to spend part of their Tuesday night with us. And I will introduce each of them, and then I'm going to give each of them an opportunity to talk. The agenda for tonight is really to kind of listen and hear out each of our panelists. I'm suspecting a lot of good information. We will open this up to question and answers as we go through. My name is Chris Laverme. I'm the transition coordinator for the Greenwich Public Schools. And like I said, I think this is our fourth annual college support panel. So let's see. Why don't we get started? And I'm going to ask each of our panelists to talk a little bit. And I'm going to first let me introduce them. That would be nice. We have two returning veterans to our panel, and I think they've been with us for at least the last 2, 3, maybe 4 years. But we have Karen Fisher Dickman from Lynn University. She gets the award for being furthest south in Boca Raton, Florida tonight. I hope the weather down there is wonderful as always.
Yes, absolutely. It's a cool 60-degree night in Boca Raton, so we're dressed accordingly, right?
Nice. And then we have also our veteran returning panelist, Alyssa Campo Carmen from Manhattanville College. Alyssa, I hope all is well over there in Manhattanville. Okay. And then I'm going to go more local, right across, I think, not across the river, but just down county a little bit. We have Lauren Rodriguez, who is representing the State University of New York at Purchase. Welcome, Lauren. And Karen Toole, who takes the prize for being furthest north. And she is joining us from Syracuse University, where she is the coordinator of their academic support and on-track programs at Syracuse University. So welcome, Karen. So I think I'd like to jump right into it. I'm going to give each panelist about 5 or 6 minutes to talk a little bit about their school, talk about specific programs at their school for students with special needs, and maybe kind of express something unique about their programs. So I'm going to go with some of our new folks, if they would be willing to start off. Lauren Rodriguez, would you mind batting leadoff for us tonight?
Sure, I will go for it. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Lauren Rodriguez, the director at Purchase College, SUNY, right down the road from Alyssa at Manhattanville. And so I'm here to talk about our Cornerstone program, which is a fee-based program for students on the autism spectrum. And so I think we're a bit unique in that out of all the SUNYs in New York State, we're only one of the 2 that have a program for students on the spectrum. The other is SUNY New Paltz. And also our students who are generally enrolling in the program, Cornerstone, and are at Purchase College, they're really interested in the arts. We have a lot of students on the spectrum who are majoring in playwriting, screenwriting, theater, and performance. So that's really unique and cool as well. So the Cornerstone program provides individual coaching with program staff. So the fee includes either meeting with a program staff member either once or twice a week. And those meetings are really tailored towards each student's individual learning and social profile, along with goals that they establish. They might work on, advocating with faculty, working on executive functioning skills and pre-planning, as well as, reaching out to clubs and organizations and getting involved in the social components at school, maybe some assistance if they're living in the residence halls as well. We also have a summer orientation program for new students. So there's, in general, for all incoming new students, there's a summer orientation program, and our program itself takes place a few days before that program and really assists students in their transition to the college. Students, if they're living on campus, get to move in early, figure out how to navigate the meal plan, dining, take tours where their classes will be, and really get used to living in campus housing. In addition, in the program, we have a peer mentor program. So each student is assigned to meet with an undergraduate peer mentor. They're typically juniors or seniors, and they'll meet regularly. With the peer mentors themselves, they're really reinforcing skills that the students are working on with the program staff and what their goals are. But also, our peer mentors are out there in Purchase College. They're introducing students to what's going on in the community, how to get connected to clubs, organizations, become leaders, and navigating, sometimes connecting them to campus resources. So I think that's one of the most beneficial pieces of the program itself. We get a lot of positive feedback about the peer mentor program. We also offer a weekly group, and really the topics depend on student interests and timing of the semester. So we might have guest speakers come in related to the advising center and class registration. If housing selection is coming up, housing will come in to reinforce, how to go through those processes. And then we have sponsored social events. So the students have a social events committee where they plan movie nights and different things they want to do on campus together. And lastly, we provide support and consult and collaborate with the students in our career center related to jobs and internships and career readiness, if that's part of the students' goals. So that's a summary of Cornerstone.
Okay, great. And what we're going to do for families and parents and students out there, if you can just hold your questions. You may have a question for one of our specific panelists. If you can hold your questions until we go through all 4 presentations, then we will open it up to questions at that point. So thank you, Lauren. Thank you for talking about SUNY Purchase, and welcome to our panel. Next, we're gonna drive up north, all the way up there to almost the Canadian border. And Karen Toole from the Syracuse University, if you would take a few minutes to talk a little bit about the accommodations programs that you have, and more specifically, I think your On Track program.
Yes, we are up north by the Canadian border. Unlike Karen at Lynn, it is 35 degrees here with little snowflakes coming down. So I'm a little jealous right now, I have to say. But thank you everybody for joining us. So up at Syracuse, we have the On Track at SU program, and it is a fee-based program for first-year students. We do have an option if students that participate in the first year choose to stay in it for a second year, they can do so. And the purpose of our program was really to give enhanced supports to students. So what it involves is twice a week meetings face-to-face with a trained ADHD LD coach. Our coaches are full-time. We require a master's degree, and they also go through training with JST, Jody Sleeper Triplet. If you peruse our website, there's a link to her and what her program does and kind of how we're trained in that sense. And so there's always that academic piece, right? You think of transition to college, the expectations for students. And our program involves that. The big piece of the academics, obviously, that's why they're there. But in addition, it's very holistic in nature. And so we really want our students to have the best possible experience for them. So some of the other things, aside from organizational skills, time management, study strategies that they'll be going over with their coach, it's also about, in essence, they're managing their life. So such things as connecting to clubs and organizations, inevitably, students have that 8 a.m. class they don't want to go to, and it might be a little bit hard to get to when it is snowing and across campus, right? So what does that look like? What does that mean the night before? Getting prepared, getting ready. You don't have a designated lunch break. So what does that mean to maybe make sure, oh, wow, I have 3 classes in a row and I'm really hungry and can't concentrate. All these little things that go into kind of managing what it means to be on your own and to manage the academic side. Such things as, self-advocacy. You have a question on a paper or, the exam coming up. Going into professors' office hours sometimes can be a little intimidating for anybody. So that might be something we talk to the student about as far as what that conversation would look like, what questions you want to ask from a communication standpoint. And the biggest piece is that it's individualized. So every student's different. They learn differently. They adapt differently. They transition differently. And so it is very individualized in nature. At the start of the semester, we go over the academic piece, the syllabi, getting everything down on a monthly calendar, looking at expectations, making sure they understand, the software portals for the different classes. So that looks the same. But after that, it is different in what we do with each student, because it's really based on their needs, where they need the support. And so in that sense, it's very student driven. And we always make it a point to stress that. It's not somebody sitting there saying, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to do it. This is when you need to do it. We really look for the student to be part of that learning process and what it means to them to be a college student. What does it look like for them? There's some bumps in the roads, you make good progress and you sink down, you make progress, you sink down, but inevitably we find that the students really learn about themselves in the college setting. And so students that participate in the on-track, one of the things we emphasized is communication, self-advocacy with their coach. Certainly we'll work on self-advocacy at other parts of campus, but with their coach, and expressing where they need the support. And so, so that's the on-track program. We're in our, this is our third year. This past fall, the one we just had a pilot peer mentoring program. It started off small, only about 6 mentors, mentees. So next fall we plan to expand that. So we will do some peer mentoring with the students as well. And then as far as what makes us unique, I don't know if anything is unique about our on-track program, but something that is unique about Syracuse University is that it has a Disability Cultural Center, the DCC. It's one of the first in the nation, many decades ago. And it really is a space for students that choose to identify as having a disability and look at that as part of a culture, to come together, to meet, to do social things, to go to events on campus. They have a great new space in our Student Union Center. And so it's just an interesting piece that students choose to participate in, that they can. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen. Really appreciate it. Thank you for representing Syracuse tonight on our panel. Okay, we're going to take that long trip down I-95 all the way to Boca Raton, Florida, in 60-degree weather. And Karen Fisher-Dickman, who has, again, agreed to be a part of our program. Karen, if you could talk a little bit about Lynn University and some of your wonderful accommodations programs that are available there at Lynn.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us tonight. We really appreciate it. We've always had such a great relationship with Greenwich High School and Greenwich Public Schools, so it's great to be here. So as I said, my name is Karen Fisher-Dickman. I work at Lynn University in Boca Raton, Florida. We are a small university of about 3,000 students, and the name of our fee-based academic support program is the Institute for Achievement and Learning, which is just way too long for everybody to remember and say every single time. So at Lynn, we just call it the Institute for short, or the IAL for short. This is a program that's been around for years and years, since the early 90s. It's academic support only. So students are in the same classes, the same majors, the same residence halls as everybody else. It's just going to be extra support for students outside of the classroom. So they're going to have access to professional tutors, as many hours per week that they need for every class that they're in. They're also going to have access to our writing center, which is kind of a come and go as you need type of a situation for writing content specific. We have a very writing intensive curriculum for our students. So we found that writing center has been a real game changer for our students, especially in the support program. We also have a testing center where students are able to take any exams that they might have in a quiet, distraction-free, lighting, sensory, climate controlled area where they can take as long or as little as they need to take any exams that they have. And then I really feel as though the cornerstone to our program is an academic coach. And that's a one-on-one coach who students meet with 60 minutes a week. It can either be once a week for 60 minutes. It can be twice a week for 30 minutes. I've even had students over the years who have done 3 times a week for 20 minutes, because again, that's what sort of works the best for them. And they sort of work with students I think technically the job assignment is on organizational, structural, time management things, but really it truly becomes a catch-all for everything that is college, that is Lynn University. I've said it a million times, the academic coaches are truly the backbone to the Institute and are really the lifeline for our students. When students are in the Institute for Achievement and Learning, we ask them to submit their most recent psych ed testing that has been done within the last 3 years. And I say like I'm involved in that. I do not have a background in reading psych ed testing. That is far above my general knowledge, that's for sure. But our academic coaches who have extensive training in everything that is working with students with diagnosed learning differences, they are certified by the National Coaching Federation. They have backgrounds in all of this, read that thick psych ed testing, and they go through and they really intentionally match students with coaches to make sure that they're really working with students intentionally so that students feel comfortable with them. Because again, they are meeting with them on a weekly basis and going through so many things. And they really want to make sure that we're matching the right student to the right coach. And like I said, working with them the entire time they're at Lynn. The goal of the program is for students to transition out over the 4 years. It's not to say that we don't have students that stay all 4 years, because we absolutely do. But the goal is to sort of give students that sort of self-advocacy and everything that they need to be successful in the Institute and then successful in everyday life. Our building that the Institute is located in is strategically put in the middle of campus. We don't want anybody to feel secluded or that, oh, I go to that campus, it's over here down the street and around the corner. We want them to feel a part of it. But at the same time, students can disclose to everybody that they're in the Institute. They can disclose to nobody that they're in the Institute. That is completely up to them. And much like some of my other panelists have said, if you're in the Institute, your program can look completely different to your friend who's in the Institute, because again, it's not a one size fits all situation. We want to make sure that you're getting what you need out of the program. As I said, it is academic support only at Lynn. We do not offer any course modifications or remediation. It's all academic support. You're in the same classes as everyone else. So for admission to the program, you fill out your application, you apply to the university, your application gets read by your friendly Connecticut admission rep, myself. And then if you check off that you're interested in that support program, you'll then submit just some more information and your recent psych ed testing, as I said, and then you'll be able to be accepted into that program as well. So as long as you're accepted to Lynn and you're interested in the Institute, you're good to go in that regard. In terms of interesting things or unique things about Lynn for students, they're actually not specific to the Institute. They're actually for all of our students at Lynn, but honestly, I think that they've been such a game changer for our students in the Institute. There's two things that I want to mention quickly. One is our iPad program. We established an iPad program back in 2014 where every student at Lynn receives an iPad Pro and all of their books are loaded right on there. So we are a textbookless campus. So we don't have a bookstore. We don't have a store that sells books. If you need to buy a book for a class, you just go to the library and get it out. Everything is done on the iPad through electronic textbooks. So things like that, you can have the book read aloud. We give you an Apple Pencil so you can still highlight and take notes and all that kind of stuff, but it's all electronic. And that's been a real game changer for our students. And so many of the apps that they're able to use, again, it's been a really amazing opportunity for our students in that respect. The other thing that's been a game changer for our students is something that we just changed and started last year. It's something positive that came out of COVID. Imagine that, right? And that's our new schedule. So we have moved to a block schedule at Lynn University. So we still have 16-week fall semester and spring semester for our students, but when students come for their fall semester and spring semester, we just take that 16 weeks and we chop it up into 4 4-week blocks. So block A, B, C, and D. So students take one class per block. So they're only taking one class at a time. So yes, you're taking that class every day for 4 weeks. And yes, you are learning an entire semester's worth of work in 4 weeks. So you're very busy, but you're only focusing on one class at a time. And like I said, this is how it is for every student, regardless if you're in the Institute or not. But again, in my opinion, to only have to focus on one class at a time, I mean, game changer. I'm sorry to keep saying that word, but it's true. You know, gone are the days of, I'm so stressed, I have 2 papers and a test and 3 quizzes all this week, you know, or final exam week when you're so stressed out because you have so many things due, because you only have to worry about that one class at a time. So some new things at Lynn, but again, I think can be really beneficial for all students, but especially any of those students who might be in our academic support program. So those are some interesting things about Lynn.
Thanks, Karen. Really appreciate it. So we're gonna come right back up close to home here in Greenwich, right over the border, in Purchase, New York. And Alyssa Campo Carmen, we appreciate you coming back and representing Manhattanville. Why don't you tell us something about Manhattanville and the wonderful programs that you have over there in Purchase?
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. So I can't compete with free iPads or anything like that, but our programs, we have two, and I think that's what kind of makes us unique. We have one that is specific for students on the autism spectrum, really similar to Cornerstone actually over there at Purchase, just less than a mile down the road. But we also have an academic program, so I'll touch upon both of those. Our academic program, we call the Valiant Learning Support Program. We call it VLSP for short because it is a lengthy name. That is our larger program. We have generally about 85 students in that program. That's across all 4 classes. Within that program, students are paired up with a learning specialist that they work with 3 hours per week, typically. There is an option to add a 4th hour if a student feels that they need that additional support before it really is the max. They will work with that learning specialist on executive functioning skills pertaining to the academics. So they're really looking at organization, time management, working through the writing process, developing study skills. So just kind of like the how-to pieces of how to successfully navigate the college curriculum. So the first week is just kind of collecting all of the syllabi, figuring out how to start mapping that out. How do I prioritize? How do I break down these different assignments? Things of that nature. And so it's pretty nice to have, it's typically 1-hour sessions. So you're checking in about 3 times a week. While that seems like a good amount, it's not a lot in a college work week. So students really do have to be doing that independent work. And that's where part of that time management piece comes into play. Learning specialists will help to break things down for students and sort of give them tasks to complete between sessions. Just to try to help them stay on track. It is a student-driven program, so students have to be motivated and kind of ready to go. The learning specialists will really take their lead, and of course, sometimes we all get stuck, so if needed, we can kind of help them along a bit, but we really do rely on the student to keep the learning specialist informed of what's going well and what's not. Shifting gears, we go over to our Pathways and Connections program, which we call PAC. And that is our program for students on the autism spectrum. It has 4 components. The first is a weekly meeting with our PAC coordinator. And that will be, it's really customized, kind of just working with the student on whatever might be going on. So it's not counseling, it's not academic, it's sort of what falls in the middle. I'm having a roommate conflict. How do I go about resolving that? Okay, let's role play that and see what we can figure out. I need to write an email to my professor, but I'm nervous and I don't know how to word that. Okay, let's sit down and work on that together. So it's things like that. There's also a weekly workshop for students, which similar to Cornerstone, it's kind of catered to the students' needs. We sort of ask them, what are some of the things that you're interested in or that you feel you need more support with. We work really closely with our Career Development Center, just so that we could get students started on building their resumes and understanding how to network and how to dress for an interview and things like that. We also work really hard to try to get them connected with clubs and organizations on campus and kind of find different areas where they can sort of fit in and, find common interest with other students and hopefully then build those relationships. There is a peer mentoring component as well. A peer mentor would spend an hour or 2 per week with a student. Generally, that looks like, either having a meal in the dining hall or maybe going to a club meeting together to help sort of model some of the social cues and behaviors and things of that nature. And then we do social events specific to our PAC participants, typically 3 per semester. They're pretty fun events, but we try to also we'll do things on campus and off campus. Like if we go to restaurants, again, it's that opportunity to kind of interact with the wait staff and things like that. So we're having a fun time, but we're also building some of those important social skills that we just need in life. So that's kind of Manhattanville in a nutshell. Students need to get in on their own merit. And then once they are admitted and they have deposited, they can start working with our Center for Student Accommodations. We'll work on accommodations first and foremost, and then kind of figure out the program pieces. Students get to renew their contracts every semester. So if they start out with both programs and then decide they only need one or they need none, You're not locked in for the full year. We do not kick students out of the programs. If they want to stay all 4 years, they're welcome to it. Needs do change and evolve. So we leave that up to the student, but certainly if they feel ready to fly out of the nest, for lack of a better term, we support that as well. So I think that's it.
Excellent. Much appreciated, Alyssa. So I think we're going to allow families and parents and students, if you have some questions, please formulate them. I want to say as well, I should have said this at the beginning. I think, I think as Karen had said, one of the positives that to come out of this COVID is that we're able to kind of do something like this virtually. We don't have to worry about the weather, and we don't have to worry about parking and traffic on college night. You could sit back in your living rooms or your study room and, have your favorite snack. And the other thing is we don't have to wear masks, which I think is also pretty positive. So we are really appreciative that we're able to all join together tonight for this hour and share information. So I know in the last 25 minutes, there was a lot of information. We heard some similarities, we heard some differences, we heard a lot of uniqueness with these 4 programs. So I'm going to open it up. If there are questions from the audience, please let's hear them.
Okay, we do have a couple of people. Just a general question: do students live on the campus, or do they come home every day? So that's like really a question, for maybe how many people commute to school and how many people live on campus, and whether there's a difference maybe for the kids in the learning programs.
Lauren, you want to take that first?
Sure. I don't have an actual percentage, but many of our students live on campus. Some will commute to and from campus. It really depends. I think COVID and remote learning has also changed that a bit, but they generally live on campus at Purchase.
Okay. Karen Toole?
Yeah, as far as in the on-track program, all of our students live on campus. There is a small percentage in general at Syracuse that do commute, though.
Okay. Karen Fisher?
So at Lynn, housing is mandatory for freshman and sophomore year. So students are actually required to stay on campus. Junior and senior year, it's not mandatory, but it is available for students if they want.
Alyssa?
And at Manhattanville, we have a mixed bag. There's really no science to whether a student lives on campus or not if they're in our programs. It really just totally depends on the student's preference and their proximity to the campus. I would say at this point, probably again with the impacts of COVID, we are leaning more toward commuter at this moment, but that certainly could change at any point.
So in a more general question, being a commuter or being on campus, does that limit you in terms of, accessing the support services that have been discussed? No. Okay, good.
Okay.
Another question?
A specific question for Lynn. What percentage of students are enrolled in the Institute?
So it varies from year to year, but runs between 20 and 25%. Fortunately, we don't have a cap. So as many students as want to enroll, we'd love to have them.
Anyone else want to maybe tackle that question with your respective schools? Percentage of students that are receiving support services or identifying?
We're at about, I think it was like 12% of students. Yeah.
We're a bit higher, and we've been pretty consistent at Purchase. I think we average about 20%.
Same with Manhattanville.
About 20%. Okay. Is that kind of across the board with support programs like across the country, maybe about 20%, or does that vary?
I believe national norms are a bit lower. I think it hovers around like 12% typically.
Okay, great. Okay, other questions?
And then, here's a question that may be difficult, if depending on how you collect your data, but say like the percentage of students with disabilities who graduate, a graduation rate, and then also the percentage employed.
So I don't have numbers specifically on employment at least, but we look at students at Lynn, at least in different cohorts, right? So we have like an accelerated cohort and we have, a cohort for our Institute for Achievement and Learning. And ironically, our institute has probably one of the highest, if not the highest, graduation rate. And I think the students are really determined and they really have a lot of stick-to-itiveness. And so actually that's one of our highest graduation cohorts for students. Unfortunately, I don't know statistics for employment, but in terms of graduation rate, it's one of our highest cohorts for sure.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Again, I think that is kind of tough data to have. Andy.
Okay. I have a question. I'm gonna jump in for a second, Judy, and we'll come back. I have a question. I know we have 3 of our 4 panelists are accommodations folks, and then one of our panelists is an admissions person. We probably have some sophomores, juniors, and probably seniors that are out there. In terms of when a family and a student starts to research, the whole college search process, should they be looking at the support program as the primary focus? Should they be looking at the school as the primary focus? Or should there be something in the middle? And I would be interested to hear from both sides, from the admissions person and from the accommodations folks.
All right, so I'll jump in and I'll say that I think you have to look at it sort of holistically. So Manhattanville College, we have great support services. We're a small institution, and those 2 things make us a really enticing college, right? However, we are a liberal arts institution. So that means that all students are required to take classes in all of the subject areas. And so if we have a student that is, just wants to do computer science and that is their path and they do not want to take any other type of class, I would say Manhattanville's not for them, right? Despite the support. So I think you really do have to look at what are the programs being offered? What does the student want to study? And then what, if that's available at the particular institution, you obviously want to also make sure that the support services that are needed are in place. I would also say, I can't speak for all of my colleagues, but with our programs, we don't want students to look at that as a crutch. We really want them to have the skill set and be college ready. And then we're kind of just there to help with that transition, but it's not the same thing as like a resource room where we can sort of carry the student through in that similar type of fashion. So I don't know if anyone wants to bounce off of that.
I think it's also important to know what the admission requirements are because, are you able to be accepted to the university? You have to make sure that you meet the academic requirements to get into the university, regardless of the support program. Also, too, I think that you need to make sure what the admission requirements are for the support program. There are support programs out there that require you to then apply to the support program, and there are chances that you could get denied from that support program. So I think it's really important that when you're looking at schools to know what the options are for admission at the university, but then what the options are for admission to that support program. Those are really, really important things to look at when you're looking at the university. Fortunately, there's, almost 4,000 colleges and universities out there, a lot with support programs. So big schools, small schools, I think you can really attack it. Maybe you think a big school with a support program is what you're looking for. Go look at that school, go on a tour. And maybe you think, okay, no, this isn't for me. And so you could scale it back a little and start looking at smaller schools and things like that. I think you can attack it in a lot of different ways to really feel what's going to be the best fit for you. Because at the end of the day, support program or not, you have to make sure that that college is the right, or college or university is the right fit for you, with or without the support program.
How about Lauren?
I was just going to mention, for example, at Purchase, we have some conservatory programs that are very specific. And so we've run into, say, you want to be a creative writing major. Awesome. It's a very unique program. But one of the requirements of that major is that you participate in workshopping other people's writing. So if you're a student who maybe experiences a barrier related to class participation in front of other students, that might not be a good fit for you because that likely can't be waived. So I think really thinking about what barriers as a student you might experience and what that would look like in your choice of major, and really asking those questions when you go to visit as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Karen?
Yeah, I agree with all of that, particularly what Karen was saying. I mean, when you look at all these different options when it comes to accommodations and support programs and campus and the size of the campus, it is hard to know where to begin. And I think it's really like everything else we mentioned, student driven. I think the student has to really think about what it is they want out of college, not just the degree and the academics of it, but what does the college look like? Go visit. What kind of, I'm always like a vibe person. Like, what kind of vibe did you get? Can you see yourself here? Do you feel comfortable here? If so, okay, great. Now look at what support programs you think you need and what they have to offer. So I think it is, you don't really know where to start, but you got to start somewhere. And at Syracuse, it's a large university. So some of those lecture halls for psychology that every freshman has to take, there's 200 students in that class, that we can't create an accommodation that you can't take the psychology class, or there's only 20 students in the classroom. And I know that's a big piece for some students, being in that type of setting. So as Lauren mentioned, asking some of those questions about what those courses really look like, what the classrooms look like, what the experiences are in those classrooms is important as well.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we'll go back to our questions.
So one parent asked a very good question, so how should we be inquiring about these kinds of services at other schools? Doing this research is definitely one of the reasons that we, have these kinds of panels and our other, programs for students and for parents, because we want to encourage you to be able to do this research on your own. I hope that, everyone's description of their programs gave you some ideas of what's out there, so you can kind of ask those questions. I would say, and please let me know if you agree, panelists, but like starting with the website perhaps is the way to go. Then, maybe picking up the phone and having a conversation with someone would be an additional way. We also have our GHS planning guide has some great questions for when you're researching college programs and even programs for students with disabilities in there. So I would say that would be, the best way to find out. And again, you're combining it with like what majors do they offer? What kind of setting is it in addition to what support programs? It's a real blend.
And I'm sure everyone would agree, I'm going to say if you go back 20 years ago, there were certainly support programs and accommodations on college campuses, et cetera. But in the last 10 to 15 years or so, very specialized programs have been popping up at all different colleges and universities across the country. And that's why we're hearing and seeing more, specifically with ASD population, more and more schools that are having specific programs that are, to benefit the ASD population. And I know one thing for myself is I get asked these questions an awful lot by parents and students about different support programs, and you folks that are on today are some of the folks that I refer parents to. But I also learn from you, and sometimes I learned from Lauren when I spoke to her last week that I believe you said that PACE has an outstanding program. So you kind of learn from each other, and you folks seem to have good information about other schools as well. So you're a good source of information for parents if your school may not be the exact right fit for them.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, I always recommend that calling the disability office, because even if your student might not be on the spectrum, we know of other individuals or in the area who might provide executive function coaching. So we can make referrals as well. So if you are interested in that, but we don't have a program, you could still inquire just because of connections in the area. Excellent.
Judy, any other questions?
There are a couple of questions that are aligned. So one is, does a student have to request specific accommodations from each professor or class? And do professors give accommodations for extra time for testing?
Every office might be different, but at Syracuse University, we have access coordinators, and they're the individuals that work with students on accommodations. So we have 9 full-time staff that do that. They meet one-on-one with the student. Obviously documentation is sent, but really talk to the student about what sports they had in the past, what supports they think they need moving forward in college. And then a letter is generated that strictly states the student's name, the courses that they're in, what their accommodations are. And yes, extended time is probably the most commonly used accommodation, extended time on exams. It can be with assignments, note-taking assistance. There's various accommodations. But then that letter gets sent through our disability resource portal and gets sent to the professor. So, you know, Joe Smith gets XYZ accommodations and the professor's aware. If the student feels they would like to discuss the accommodations with them, they can, but it's certainly not required. And then if anything occurs where the professor might be, you know, questioning something or not sure, maybe he's new, we always tell the student to come back to their access coordinator, because that's our responsibility to discuss that with the professor. It's not the student's responsibility to explain that. So.
We have we use the same system as Syracuse, like an online system. So we're similar, but we also, students are required to renew their accommodations every semester. So to let us know they're enrolled and what accommodations they require for each course. I think the other important piece that I always try to echo to students, especially a student who might have a disability where things change, right? Like you might have received these supports in high school, but you get to college, it looks totally different. So just because you set up your accommodations one time doesn't mean that that's the only accommodations you get. So we always encourage students to come back to us, tell us a bit more about what they're experiencing in the class. And it could be based on like one type of class and the format, which could be very different from maybe a typical lecture class. So it's a more fluid process, I believe.
Yeah, I would echo what Lauren said, as well as what Karen said. We have a similar process at Manhattanville. The only difference for us is that we do have the students renew their letters every semester, but we actually have them provide the letters to their professors. Because they might not want to disclose to all faculty. They might only feel they need accommodations in a certain class. And so we put the ownership on them, and we also like them to have a discussion with their faculty, so the faculty gets a face to the name. So when we send out a test request and say, you know, so-and-so needs to take their test, the professor doesn't say, I don't even know who this is, right? So, so we have the students do that, and they can disclose what they want or what, you know, they don't have to disclose their disability or anything like that. Legally, we can't disclose that. So the ownership really is on the student.
Karen?
Lynn is essentially the same way as Manhattanville. We actually don't disclose anything. We put that ownership completely on the student for them to say whatever they want or whatever they don't want to the faculty member. Also, too, we are trying to provide them with real world skills. You know, at the end of the day, if they have a boss that they need some accommodations in the real world, they're not going to have some sort of coach or service provider saying, oh, my boss, I need more time for this. So again, we're trying to prep them for life after college or university as well. So that ownership with us is completely put on the student.
Go ahead, Judy.
Well, if you don't mind, because this is like a very good segue. You know, those were accommodations we were talking about here. Someone asked really about modification to a program. So this would be helpful. You know, let's say, for example, learning a foreign language has always been very difficult for a student. Could that type of class, or maybe even any other type of class, be waived as needed for students?
So at Manhattanville, we have a policy for substitutions for math and second language. However, the caveat to this is that the student would need to provide us documentation to show that there is a direct, you know, disability that's associated with learning either of those subjects. And of course, we like to hear from the student themselves as well. And so the committee will review those things. But the caveat is that if the student is applying for one of those things and it would compromise the integrity of their program of study, then we may not be able to approve that. And generally, modifications cannot be done in college either. Because again, oftentimes those types of modifications that you might see in high school would be seen as compromising the integrity of courses or programs at the college level.
Anyone else?
At Purchase, we do not have a foreign language requirement, so I don't review the substitution requests. It's actually a language and cultures requirement. So a variety of courses like Chinese cinema, sign language, will fulfill that requirements. But we would accept if a student was requesting a math waiver, we would look at the documentation and the student's self-report of their disability-related barriers.
Karen or Karen?
Our process at Syracuse is identical for the most part to what Alyssa said as far as, waivers, but the caveat of it can't, it affects the integrity of the program and also the college that it's at, but it's a similar system. Yeah.
Yeah, same with Lynn. Generally speaking, there is no course modifications whatsoever, and there's very few exceptions for waivers.
I have a question which kind of goes along with this subject. A student, a high school student, either on an IEP with an IEP or a 504, how do they transfer their 504 or their IEP to college? Or what is that process?
Well, I mean, it doesn't technically transfer to college. I mean, certainly we ask for documentation to get to know the student better, but it kind of an IEP or 504 doesn't, I would say, really exist at the college level. I mean, maybe my colleagues here can talk more about that, but it's more working with accommodation and other types of supports with your access coordinator to help support the student.
So in essence, I guess my question, and obviously this was a trick question, but how do colleges utilize the 504 and the IEP? Since it is a separate document and you're guided under different laws, how do colleges and universities utilize the 504 and the IEP?
Well, at Syracuse, when the student registers with our Center for Disability Resources, we request that documentation or whatever documentation they want to share be uploaded into our system. And then the access coordinator, who is the person that works with them on accommodations, would review that just to understand, again, support student had in the past, get to know the student. And then at that point, it doesn't transfer over necessarily. It's just a tool we use to understand the student. Really what we go on is the one-on-one conversation interview that the access coordinator and the student has to determine types of accommodations. And similar to what Lauren said, that's not set in stone. Certainly things change, courses change, so that can be adjusted as they move through their college career.
Okay. Anyone else?
I would pretty much say that, I would agree with what Karen is saying. I think we use the IEP really as a historical document just to kind of give us more context. But the main thing is that we really do just want to hear from the student. And I think, I'll go slightly rogue here, Chris, because I know this is coming anyway. I think one of the things that's most important for students and parents to think about as they're making this transition is that all of us here on the call, or the people that are working with students on putting accommodations in place, they want to talk directly to the student. And so it's really important that the student themselves can identify the barriers in their learning so that we can then support them. Oftentimes students, they don't know necessarily what their diagnosis is, or they don't know how to describe the impact on their learning. And so mom or dad or grandma or whoever wants to kind of jump in and say, well, this is what they need. And that's not, it's hard for us we can't put accommodations in place based on what mom thinks or dad thinks, even though we really appreciate the knowledge that they have there, right? Like, your son or daughter better than we do. We just met them, but we really need to hear from the student.
Alyssa, you're reading out of my playbook. Because my next question was going to be the role of the parent. So if anyone has anything they want to add to that, kind of the role of the parent in terms of not only the college search process, but in terms of, having a college student with a disability. Anyone else want to add something to that?
Well, fortunately, in the admission office, I have no problem talking to parents all day long, every day. It's what I do. However, I will speak for my colleagues over in the Institute. They actually have a rule where after orientation, they will chat with you during welcome weekend and move in, but they have a strict 2-week rule. They will not speak to any parent for the first 2 weeks of school. So they want to get to know your son or daughter on their level. And then after 2 weeks, then they will establish a plan with your son or daughter to speak to you as needed. And if they're speaking to you via the phone, your student will be there, because if you're speaking about the student, it's only fair that your student is there. And if you're speaking via email, your student is always copied on the email, because again, if you're speaking about your student should be included in the conversation. So that's how it works at the Institute. And to be honest with you, I think it's a great idea. But again, in the admission office, we don't have those rules, so you can call us all the time. It's fine.
Anyone else want to add something to that? Role of the parent? Okay. So my next question would be, and maybe Judy, just if there's another question in the, hold on a second. So it's obvious that we're really asking the student to, self-advocate and have those disclosure skills, so on and so forth. But each of you, if you were speaking to a high school student right now, and you are speaking to high school students right now, what's the one thing that you would tell them that they need to be working on to kind of ready themselves for college, and more specifically to access the support services that they're going to need in college? The one thing that they're going to need.
I would say, about 80,000 things popped in my head, first of all. But ask questions, and not just be curious, but and it goes back to that self-advocacy and communication Alyssa was talking about with, communicating to the access coordinators. As much as we try to review everything with the students and talk about all the sports we have and the university has, it's impossible to go over everything. And so if you need something, if you need a support, like once you're in college, even in the professor, if you're not sure about an assignment, doesn't matter. Don't be afraid to go up to somebody, your whoever it is, professor, and say, how do I do this? Where do I find this? I need this. I don't know where to go. Like, it's okay. There's not a freshman on any campus their first few months that knows what the heck they're doing. I don't care who it is. It's how big or small the college is. It's a completely new environment, and that's okay. But don't be afraid to communicate and ask questions, because that's how you find stuff out.
Okay.
I was going to say the same thing. Self-advocacy, like practice. Maybe you're not comfortable calling somewhere. Practice that, calling places, even if it's ordering dinner, like to go, talking to people on the phone, related to the self-advocacy is so important. The other part of it is so much of what is communicated on our campus is via your email, your Purchase College email. And so that's where the bill goes directly to the student, anything about class registration, getting housing, etc. So really, having the skills to check your email multiple times a day and keeping it organized and up to date on that, I think is super important, because that's the official means of communication on our campus.
Okay. Alyssa or Karen?
Yeah, so I agree with both of those things. Big time, ask questions and check the emails. Those are really important. I would also say be honest. And what I mean by that is I see a lot of times students come in and it's a huge transition. I mean, it's a different world. And so they start to struggle, and then they're afraid to say something. And then it snowballs into this big mountain of snow that now we can't dig ourselves out of. We're here to help and to support. And part of this transition is at times making mistakes or not doing well in something, and that's okay. And so be honest with the people who are there to support you, because that's what we're there for.
Karen?
I think give yourself a little bit of credit. There are students who have been receiving academic support for years and years and years, and trust yourself that you have the skills that you need and you have a really good base, that maybe after a year or so, you can transition out of academic support programs. I've seen it all the time. I think that, students, you have to realize you've come in with this great foundation. Your high school has done a really great job and you've done a really great job. So give yourself some credit. You might be transitioning out of support services sooner than you think. Also, too, I've also seen students who have come in saying, oh, I got this, I can do it on my own, and struggled a little bit. It's also okay to jump into support services later on. Come in freshman year, try it on your own. If it doesn't work, that's okay, no problem. You can always jump in halfway through the semester or halfway through the year, or maybe your second year. That's okay too. So just keep those things in the back of your head as well.
Thank you. Judy, any questions in the Q&A?
Well, someone asked for like a little bit more specificity to the type of materials that they would need to submit in order to be evaluated and as part of disabilities programs, such, for example, a psychoeducational evaluation. I think my recommendation would be is to check out, again, the websites, the program websites. I know you guys are very specific about what you require on them, and there's definitely going to be commonalities, I think, among them. So for parents, I would definitely say, take a look at the websites, and if you have any questions, either, our special education teachers at the high school or the school counselors, Chris Laverme, myself, will all be happy to help, you determine what it is that you might need.
Okay, great. And as we've already said, families, students, reach out to the folks that we have online here. I think each of you would say we've probably had some students that have, taken advantage and reached out to you as resources, partially because you're on my list and you're my go-to people, but you've all been wonderful in terms of providing that kind of information. I just have we have about 5 or 6 minutes left. I just have a couple of general questions, and you all could take a chance at answering these. I get asked a lot about specific colleges for twice exceptional learners, or specifically special education colleges. Would any of you be willing to kind of talk about that a little bit? How would a student?
Yeah, I mean, we just at Syracuse, I'm familiar with twice exceptional and special education colleges, but we don't. On track is one of the biggest supports. In addition, completely separate, but Syracuse University does have what's called Inclusive U for students that need a much higher level of support. So that may fall into the special ed type of college, but as far as our programs, we don't really offer that.
I mean, I think when we're talking, and I'm not sure if Landmark and Beacon would prefer to be known as that, but that is about as close as I think as you would get to, AKA a special education college, is that everyone on campus has a learning difference and the programs are specifically designed for those students. But it's programs like yours that it really is about accessibility, if I'm correct, right? Let me think, what else? We have a few minutes left, so I'm going to give each of you a minute. Now, Judy, did you have a question?
Well, a parent asked, do any of your universities or perhaps other universities offer a summer program, let's say for current juniors, so between junior and senior year, perhaps to step foot on campus? And do you believe maybe that those can be helpful for students to make a good transition to college?
Anyone with a bridge?
We have a summer program, but it's only for students who are blind or visually impaired. We partner with Visions, but that's all we have. And we do have a pre-orientation program, like Lauren described for Cornerstone. I forgot to mention that. We have that for our 2 fee-based programs as well, but not an extensive summer program.
Purchase does not have a summer program for students with disabilities, but they do offer courses for high school students. So sometimes we'll see that a student a couple of years ago took like a creative writing course, and then they decided to come to Purchase and major in creative writing. And I'm not super familiar just because it's for high school students, but they do offer some courses on campus during the summer.
Yeah, Syracuse additionally has some courses for high school students to take. And we do have a summer program, but it's not for juniors. It's for incoming freshmen. They can come in July. It's called Summer Start and take 2 or 3 courses and be on campus about 6-7 weeks before other students.
Unfortunately, Lynn doesn't offer any sort of summer programming at all for anybody, but I think that those bridge programs and like summer programs are great. So if that's something that you're, if you're a little apprehensive about college and, not really quite sure what you're looking into, definitely look into schools that offer them. Even if you're not looking at that college or university, I think it's just a great way to get your feet wet and then maybe take some of the anxiety of going to college, especially, if some are going in from your junior year into your senior year. It's just a trial run. You're not committing to anything. You don't have to tell the admission office about it, but I think it's a really good way to just take some of the nerves out of the college, process. So I, in the admission office, am a real big advocate of those. Lynn, we should probably have one of those. So definitely a good option for you.
Any other questions?
A parent does have a question about, when do students identify themselves? Do they do it up front as part of the admissions process, or do they, go through the admissions process first? And I would say to you, I know this is a question that we want to encourage all juniors to have a very detailed conversation with their school counselor, both, spring of junior year, fall of senior year, to try and make those decisions, and which the best way to go. But if anybody has any more specific advice.
So when you're applying to a school like Lynn, you would indicate on your application that you are interested in the support program. That way we know to get the correct documentation to get you into the support program. However, like I mentioned before, if you're deciding, you know what, I got this, no support needed, and then you get to the university and think, oh my goodness, I'm in way over my head, and you decide that you want to get in, you can, elect into the program later on, and we'll get all the documentation taken care of. And that would have nothing to do with the admission office. So it's not a problem.
And we're kind of opposite. Students can certainly disclose in their letters, and often they do when they're going through the admissions process. However, the Center for Student Accommodations at Manhattanville doesn't get involved with students until they are admitted to the school. And partially that's because, of course, we'll meet ahead of time, right, and kind of talk through different things, just like as hypotheticals and what supports we do offer. But we don't want to collect documentation on a student that might not come to our institution, because that is really confidential. And so we just work with the student afterwards.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions from our audience? Any closing comments? Would anyone would like to maybe close with a comment or two before I close? So I think what I want to say is, first off, I want to really thank our panelists for agreeing to be with us tonight. We really in the last hour went through a lot of information, and we threw a lot of information out there at our audience, a lot of questions. The thing to remember, folks, is whether your son or daughter has an interest in Lynn University, Syracuse, Manhattanville, SUNY, or no interest in any of them, the real purpose of having our panelists here is to really talk about accommodations and how to access those accommodations, and what students can be doing now to kind of prepare themselves. Because, for the vast majority of the accommodations programs out there, it's all very similar. And I think you heard one very familiar theme tonight, and it's that students are going to need to really self-advocate, and they're going to need to self-disclose, and they're going to need to ask questions. So those are some things that families and parents need to be really working with their students on, as we will do the same here at Greenwich High School. It's all about independence ultimately, and it goes the same with pursuing accommodations at the college level. I always say it, Greenwich High School is wonderful. We've got a wonderful support program, special education program, support services. But by the time your son or daughter is a senior, we really need to be seeking out that level of independence so they can access the services at the next level to be successful. So that's kind of my closing comment for the evening. I want to really thank Judy Nadell for being with us tonight and fielding questions. Thank you, Judy. And behind the scenes, Michael Antonaccio, I know you put this together, the technology part of it, and I'm so appreciative of you as well, and the Greenwich Board of Education for allowing us to have this Zoom call this evening. So panelists, once again, I thank you. I appreciate it. Everyone have a wonderful next few weeks, and have a safe and happy holiday season. And hopefully we'll be back here next year, and we'll do the same again. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Thank you.